Wonderful. We're live, Justine. We're a little bit late because we were busy chin-wagging, but that's good. So welcome. Just a little intro. I'm Dr. Kate Bartram-Brown, and I am doing interviews with amazing people that I think are truly amazing because of the things that they do in the world. I'm very fortunate to have all these wonderful people around me, and Justine is exactly one of these. Now, I read her bio. I didn't know half of this stuff that was on her bio, so this is really cool when you get to read everybody's bio.
You mean my story about meeting Yoko Ono?
Well, I know Justine from Mini-Me Yoga, and she's been part of the Mini-Me Yoga family for over 3 years now, and she's heavily involved in and what goes on behind the scenes as well, and she leads a team, and she's a wonderful ambassador for children's mental health, that I know. And in the last few years, she's really started to go on this journey of being a sleep coach and working with the kids yoga and sleep and families, which is something that I really want to find out about. And you may have read Justine's bio as well, and she's got a huge amount of experience. And I love the fact that you actually say, yes, you were a teacher for a short while, but it wasn't for you. I can't imagine that you were rubbish, because you're brilliant with the kids and with.
Yeah, I think maybe if I'd taught in a nice private school with like 8 children, that'd have been fine. But 30, I felt a bit like I was playing whack-a-mole. So that's sit down. And I think, I personally was kind of sort of too young, I think. That isn't to say that other people the same age weren't more mature, but at the time I would think I wasn't in the right place. I'm sure I'd be better at it now, and I'd have all the mini yoga tools, so I know I'd be better now.
Yes, no, wonderful. No, but luckily we've got you instead. So I
don't think I did much good for the children's mental health when I was actually a teacher.
Well, I think this is an interesting point, Justine, because you've been in that situation, and it's not the easiest thing. I mean, we tend to think, oh, we're going to send our kids to school, and the teachers are going to look after the kids, and they're going to do the learning, and this is what they're trained to do. And interestingly, I have a similar story. I've never been a teacher, but when I was in Bahrain and there was some civil unrest, a lot of the teachers left, and one of the schools asked me to step in just to help with the kids because they knew me. I was a kids yoga teacher, and I was absolutely shattered. I cannot tell you, from first thing in the morning to last thing at night, I as the teachers do. So I have this massive respect for teachers that go and do this all day, and I don't think 6 weeks in the summer is enough time to recuperate, because it's very intense. What you have to realize is that there's 30 little people, all with their own emotions, or with their own thoughts, their own experiences, and then we've got learning on top. So I get it. I mean, I think they all need like a cape and a superhero thing.
Definitely. I mean, sort of, and in any one class you'll have a child who perhaps has suffered abuse or has some kind of trauma in their past. You'll have learning difficulties and different needs, and trying to meet every child's individual needs, is a skill and a half. And I take my hat off to people who do that. Yeah. And I just, I was quite young, I'd done a PGCE, which is very much a crash course. We maybe spent half a day talking about kind of disability kind of needs. I mean, this was a long time ago. I'm sure it's improved. I am very old. And hardly touched on mental health issues at all, really.
So interesting. You then went on to work in the social services, and working with children with different abilities was what you specialised in. Is that right? Could you tell us a little bit why did you decide to go into that direction?
Yeah. It's entirely the fault of he was a little boy at the time. He sadly died since, actually. A little boy called Ricky. So when I left university, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I'd been very focused as a child. I wanted to get to university. And I did that, and I got university. And then after university, I kind of went, oh, right. Supposed to be something else now. So I ended up working, just having a bit of a kind of gap year in a sense, but not a nice one, going travelling. I worked with adults with learning disabilities and challenging behaviour who'd all come out of like long stay hospitals, which was interesting and very eye-opening. I learned a lot. And then kind of in this, I decided I wanted to do the PGCE. And in the summer, I ended up working, so someone my mum worked with had a little boy with autism. And she needed someone to help look after him over the summer because both her and her husband worked. So I spent kind of 2-3 months kind of more or less doing one-to-one with this little boy. And he was just amazing. Kind of, yes, he didn't really have much language, and kind of, he had lots of this sort of odd behaviour, might be seen as odd behaviours, like coming, you knew if he liked you if he sniffed your hair and licked you. You knew kind of. But he was just so, and I just became fascinated with how he saw the world, I guess. Kind of, because if I could understand kind of where that behaviour was coming from, it made it much easier to kind of work with him and kind of understand why perhaps he watched that bit of the video over and over and over and over again. So yeah, it's his fault really, because I was considering doing kind of a law conversion degree and going and doing law and earning lots of money. So I think it's his fault.
Ricky had a big influence. That's amazing. That is amazing. So now fast forward, and obviously you've spent the last however many years, working with children in some way or another. And I would like to talk to you about how COVID, we've been through this huge change, and families have been through, being at home, and now we're going back to school. Some children have already been back to school. Some children are going back to school this week. Can you talk to us about the sleep patterns and how important how important is sleep for children, first of all?
Okay. It is really important, though I will put caveat here that most sleep studies, generally speaking, have been done with kind of adults or older teens. So, sometimes you can read things about sleep and it kind of like you suddenly kind of start panicking, thinking, oh my God, kind of like my child isn't getting enough sleep and that means this, and this. So kind of, first thing I'd say is don't panic. And actually a lot of the research has been done on adults. So, we're sometimes having to surmise, kind of for children. But I think we all know kind of almost without having to read anything that sleep's important, both for ourselves and our kids. We all know that if you had a good night's sleep, next day you've got energy, you're kind of in a good mood, you can concentrate, you can get on with life. If you've had a bad night's sleep or a run of bad night's sleep, then you're snappy, or maybe it's just me, but you've got less patience, you find it hard to concentrate, you're sluggish. So I think we all know, almost without having to read the research, that we notice the difference. And we notice the difference in kids' behaviour. If they haven't had a good night's sleep, they are more likely to kind of be, sort of find little things overwhelming, or, they're in a bad temper, or, they just can't cope as well. So, we're finding out an awful lot about what actually happens when we sleep, more and more. So there's kind of like physically, we know that a lot of repair of our cells and things go on when we sleep. For children, a lot of things like growth hormones are released while they sleep. So there's all the physical stuff that goes on. But I think kind of the big thing is the mental and emotional side of sleep. So in terms of learning, we know that when you go to sleep, your brain takes your memories from the day and moves them from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So that helps you obviously remember stuff, but it also means your short-term memory is now free again to learn again the next day. It's not kind of full. And there's lots of fascinating research around things like if you teach people, kind of get them to play a really difficult piano piece, for example, if they then divide them into groups and one group has sleep and then comes back and plays it and one group doesn't, comes back and plays it, the group who've had sleep will play it much better. They'll have learnt it much better. So we know that sleep's really important for kind of learning, concentration, and just, as I say, having those reserves to enable you to cope with kind of stuff that happens. I think it really affects your emotional resilience if you haven't had enough sleep.
So, Justine, what are the types of things that would normally interfere with children's sleep? Because we hear this a lot, don't we? We hear that some children are very good sleepers, but then most of the time we hear, oh, we can't get the kids to sleep. They're getting up every 2 minutes. Why is that? What's going on?
Well, I think sometimes it's about parental expectation. Because I think we're sold, like a lot of things, we are sold this perfect idea of the perfect child, and your child is going to start sleeping through the night from kind of sort of 6 months old, and it'll be perfect. And actually, that's just not how it is. So I think sometimes people think their child has a sleep issue when actually it is just part of normal development. So I think there's sometimes that about the lie we're sold about parenthood, possibly. So I think it's part of that. But I think also modern life in general isn't conducive to anyone's sleep. Like a lot of our physical systems, it was put in place when, we got up when it was light, and we went to sleep when it was dark. And now kind of it's essentially light more or less all the time because we've got electricity. And so I think modern ways of living kind of come up against kind of our systems. They haven't adapted as quickly. And I think that's as true for children as adults. We've got really busy lives. Children have got really busy lives. Screens are a big thing, partly because they emit blue light, which basically tells our brain it's daylight, so don't go to sleep. And also they're stimulating. You want to stay on them longer, and I'm as guilty of anyone else at kind of thinking, oh, I'll just look at this. And then 2 hours later, down the Twitter hole, and I'm thinking, I know this stuff. Children don't have that self-control. I think they are more anxious. I think particularly in COVID, children have been picking up on the anxiety around them, and have had a lack of their normal routine. So that's impacted on sleep hugely. And I would say actually for the children I work with, anxiety often is the biggest underlying issue around sleep, I would say.
And when we talk about anxiety in children, because I know, again, we are in this industry, we perhaps have a perception of what anxiety can look like or what it is, but there's a lot of parents out there that perhaps have no background in holistic practices. They have no training. They don't practice anything themselves. They perhaps they don't have that belief system or haven't had that, been exposed to that environment. What can anxiety look like in a child?
It can, I think quite often it can look like anger, kind of a child who is angry. It can look like the child who's, a lot of the children I work with exhibit it through wanting to control things. So they'll want. I've got one child I'm working at the moment who will tell them, you've got to go to bed at such and such time. Kind of, and that for her, controlling it makes her feel less anxious. So it can look, I suppose, like the way people think anxiety looks in terms of, kind of being a bit more tearful, not wanting to be separated from mum. But I think any child that shows kind of change, perhaps in their normal behaviour, I think would make me kind of worry. But as I say, I think quite often children, the anxiety is often driving things like kind of, that sort of that kind of very bossy behaviour, or kind of being quite, an angry child. I think quite often it's some anxiety that underlies that.
That's really interesting, because I think, like you say, a lot of people would presume that anxiety looks like the timid child who is quaking in the corner and, oh, I've got anxiety or whatever. But actually, it can be the very confident or overly confident child, and overcompensates, and they become very rigid. And it's like you said, it's like, I have to do this and I have to do, because it's, keeps everything in that way. So I'm glad we pointed that out. Also, Justine, what can anxiety look like in the physical body? Can it manifest itself into an illness? Can children?
Yeah. Well, I think if it, I think I don't want to pathologize anxiety too much, because a certain level of anxiety is normal. It's perfectly normal for children who are going back to school after however many months away to be feeling a bit anxious by that. I'd be, probably the children who don't appear to feel anxious at all, perhaps the ones you need to perhaps be watching. So it's a normal, it's part of normal life for us all to feel anxious. But I think when it becomes kind of an ongoing anxiety that's always there, I think that's when it can then manifest itself in illnesses. And I think children quite often, instead of saying I feel anxious, they'll say I've got a tummy ache, I don't feel well, or they get headaches. So because quite often that is where they feel it physically.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that point as well, because what I've also been, because I've worked with a lot of families over the years, and also that is a problem, is that sometimes we can be too overprotective in not allowing the children to experience, my child's going to be, have this anxious feeling. And of course, like you said, it is natural. There's going to be times in all of our lives where change comes, and we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to process and work through those feelings. And I think that's where the tools really help, having mental and emotional well-being tools. So what top tips would you give us then? So we've got the children who are naturally probably going to have a little bit of anxiety, probably maybe a little bit of excitement, probably a little bit of fear, all these different things are going on about going back to school, and then of course it might be great for the first couple of days, and then it might show up. What top tips do you have to help children maybe get that rest and sleep that they need to be able to cope and process those tools?
I would say, I think everyone can Google and you'll see, and it's absolutely true that having a consistent routine is really, really important, because that consistency in itself is reassuring. And also our brain starts to make connections between, okay, I do this, and that's when I go to sleep. So that consistent routine is really, really important. And there's lots of things around physical environment, making sure it's not too hot, unlikely at the moment, I have to say. And making sure it's, bedroom is a place for sleep. Because again, I think quite often when I'm doing assessments, I'll ask parents to describe their children's bedroom, and I'm like, whoa, no wonder they can't sleep in there. They've got TV and they've got their iPad and they've got their phone. And it's like, how are they meant to know that this is where you sleep? That's what it's for. So there's things like that you can do. But I think for me, one of the important things is about connection, because understandably, I think parents get to the end of the day and you just want your child to go to sleep. Because I have got 1,000,001 things I need to do, and I can't get them done until you've gone to sleep. And then I want to sit down and relax myself. So just go to sleep. And actually, sort of, it is a separation sleep. You're going, even if you're in the same bed as your mum, when you're asleep, you're separate. So I think it's really important to kind of view that bedtime routine, that evening routine, as a time for connection, and just really kind of accept that that's what it's going to be. It's going that for the next hour, this is going to be about you connecting with your child and getting ready to sleep. and you're going to keep really calm yourself, because as soon as you start kind of getting anxious about this bedtime routine and getting wound up that they're not going to sleep, they're going to pick up on that, and you get this vicious cycle, and no one's going to sleep now. So if you're yelling, get back into bed, go to sleep, kind of everyone's tensions are rising. And even when they do go to sleep, you're sitting there like that, and can't relax yourself. So stay calm. And if that means you have to go away and do some deep breathing yourself before you go back in, then do that. And I say, make it about connection. So one of the things I like about the tools in mini yoga is you can use those as part of the bedtime routine to do that connection, and like kind of creating your own rituals around bedtime. I really love kind of when we send out love as part of mini yoga. I think that's a lovely thing to do kind of as part of the bedtime routine. Or a gratitude practice, or even just you say the same thing every night to them when they go to bed, kind of good night, I love you, whatever it is. Or we're going to say good night the sun, to the sun and the moon and the stars, and just kind of making it quite a special time that actually you look forward to, rather than it being a battle. And I think also it's about giving children some choice within that. So they've got, particularly actually for children sometimes are anxious, you want to set the boundaries and the parameters. You are, this is bedtime, you are going to bed, but, kind of actually, which pair of pajamas do you want to wear tonight? Or kind of, we are going to do a nice, what, kind of which particular calming activity do you want to do? Do you want to just cuddle up with mum? Do you want a massage? Do you want to do some yoga together? Do you want us to do some colouring of mandalas? So they've got a bit of choice, because I think having a little bit of control helps anxiety. But if children feel like they're in control of everything, then actually that ups the anxiety, because ultimately they want you as parent to be in control. So
yeah, I love that. I love that balance. Yeah, giving them some kind of responsibility and choice, but also knowing that you are holding that space and that and nurturing, and say, okay, mummy or daddy are in charge and everything's going to be okay. But what would you like to do in this section? I really like that. So empowering, so empowering. So we've got children, and hopefully, they're going, to have this amazing sleep. Interestingly, you picked up on something that I am also fascinated with, is that if we are not practicing these tools and practicing, good night's sleep and rest and all the rest of it, it then often reflects in our children.
absolutely.
So when we're saying no screen time to children, and we're saying no to, maybe no, I don't know, whatever sugary snack in the evening and all the rest of it, then how important would you say it is that we take on these practices if we've got children, struggling with their routine?
I think it's absolutely vital, really. And this is a conversation I do have with parents when I say, right, okay, ideally no screens at all, and that includes the TV, 2 hours before bedtime, but at least minimum an hour. And when it comes to teenagers, have to be a bit more pragmatic, but at the very least make sure that there is a cut-off point. They've maybe got blue light filter over the screen, as I say, it's much easier with a 3-year-old. But even 3-year-olds, I get parents say, but they'll have a meltdown. Kind of, well, they are addictive. I do think that, well, that means you as well. And they'll be like, what? But and I'm like, well, children have got a really, really innate sense of fairness and and if you're sat there and you're on your laptop, but you're telling them they can't, they're just going to be like, well, no. It can't be that important for me not to be on my screen because you're on yours, and that's not fair. The age-old cry of children everywhere, that's not fair. And it's like, well, what's I will say to parents, well, what's your priority? Do you want your child to go to sleep, or is it more important for you to be on your laptop? Ultimately that is your choice as a parent. what you choose to do. But it's even things like parents say, well, the TV's on, but it's not something that they'd be interested in. I'm like, yeah, but the TV's still on. And I know if I go, well, in the dim distant past when pubs were open and you went inside and all that kind of thing, if it was a pub that had TV on, you know, even if I didn't have the sound on, or though it was something I wasn't remotely interested in, it would be there. And I'd be talking to people, but my eyes keep doing that. Kind of can't help, but you can't help but be drawn to this thing in the corner, even if it's not something you're interested in. So I think it is really important that parents, and it comes back to that connection thing. You can't, if you really want to have this as a quality time leading up to bedtime, it's actually quite hard to connect properly if you're being distracted by your phone or your TV. And I get it, because I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this by any stretch of the imagination, and it is really hard because we do live in this world that's 24/7 kind of turned on, but we're talking an hour, 2 hours, you know. And actually I think it's good for us as adults to switch off too. It's not going to do your sleep any harm either.
I really like that because, you know, the studies that I've personally undertaken myself all show that children respond to the way that we act and what we do, not what we say. And I think that this is like a huge revelation in parenting and in teaching actually as well, because the simple answer is if you do something, then children will mimic and copy you. And
Yeah.
and that's simple. So if you want them to do, you know, I know when I'm teaching kids yoga, I taught kids yoga to a group of children who English was their second language, and they all spoke various different languages. So there was no point in me actually talking because they wouldn't understand what I was saying anyway. And so, yeah, so
Yeah.
I did, and they followed. And that was the greatest lesson for me, because I was like, and then I started to realize, I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. These kids, that all they need to do is see something in action, and they're going to get it. They're going to understand it. Now, that's interesting because, you know, what are they seeing on the telly? What are they seeing on screen time? What, you know, not just even the act of, you know, being on screens or what have you. But I think it's just wonderful and empowering for parents to know they don't have to nag their children all the time. They don't have to keep going on at them all the time. They simply have to they do the process. If they want the children to brush their teeth, they go and brush their teeth. You know, it's kind of simple.
I think children, if they see the adults around them doing things, they value it more, as opposed to just something just kids have to do. You know, if you're an adult are doing that, it gives it meaning and value and sort of status in a sense. Because I think quite often we are very guilty of telling children to do things that we don't necessarily do ourselves. I mean, I often speak to parents about the value almost of talking children through how you deal with emotions. I think what we do a lot of the time is we try to shield our children from kind of anxiety and from our anxieties. And that's right to a certain extent, because, you know, it has to be age appropriate. You know, you don't want your 5-year-old kind of worrying about the mortgage payment. You know, it's kind of, you've got to be careful what you share. However, I think if children never see us dealing with our big emotions, they don't learn how to deal with their own. So, you know, I will kind of say to parents, you know, actually, you might feel a bit daft doing it initially, but, you know, if you're driving along and you get cut up, then, you know, not saying you swear in front of your children. However, what you might do is kind of say, oh, do you know what? That actually has made me feel quite anxious or a bit scared. And this is how it feels, you know, kind of in my body, you know, my heart's beating a bit faster, kind of I'm shaking a bit. And actually, you know, I'm going to do some deep breaths to help me calm down. Will you do them with me? Help mummy calm down. So that they see that actually sometimes adults, we get those big emotions and struggle with them, but that there are ways that you can deal with them. And I think if you start doing that with your children, you almost don't need to teach them those skills, because they see you demonstrating them and they then do them.
Exactly. Yeah, I really love that. And I think that is my, biggest top tip ever for working with children is, whatever you do, they will do. So if you can, learn to meditate, or if you can, like you say, talk about your emotions, or do all these sleep things, then that's how they're going to learn. And I think this is going to be key for parents and teachers going back, because I know we've all been talking about children being anxious about going back to school, but actually, from what I've seen, it's mainly been the parents and the teachers going, "Oh my God, we've got to go back," because they're the ones with the responsibility. They've got to think about COVID, they've got to think about all these things, and I get it, but I think it's funny, isn't it, how we say, "Oh, well, it's the maybe it's the kids," but I'm sure most kids are just thinking, "Oh, well, actually, I'm going to go and see all my friends," and that's going to be great. But it is a lot of the the adults, and I think if we can get those good night's sleep and take some nice deep breaths and do the colouring mandalas ourselves, or whatever we want to do, then that will see us see us through these bumpy, ever-changing times.
Yeah, and I think if if you're prepared for the fact it's probably going to be a bit bumpy over the next couple of weeks as everyone readjusts, I think if you accept that from the start, that makes it easier as well, I think. And you're pleasantly surprised if it's not. And some children will go back and it'll be absolutely fine. They'll go straight back into it and they'll be okay. And other children will struggle more. You've just got to be. I don't know, because I've been working from home, and I have to say I don't know how I'll feel if and when they say I've got to go back in the office. I'd be like, I don't want to. I quite like this. I've got used to this now, and I'll struggle with that readjustment back into that kind of world that we had.
Yeah.
So I think it's the adults who are struggling more than the children. I think we have to be careful about how we do that as well, because you say children pick up on things, and they will, if we're very anxious about the return to school, then your child's more likely to feel slightly anxious as well. So they'll pick up on that. They're just so good at kind of picking up on their parents' emotions, really.
Yeah, very good. They're very good. Well, Justine, our time is almost, that's whizzed by. And I'm probably going to ask if you'll come back for part 2 at some point, and we can delve deeper into more practices and things like that around sleep and yoga and different abilities and how we can work with that. Is there any last parting words that you would like to share with everyone?
I think sometimes parents, sleep is one of those things, like food, that the kind of parents get really, really worked up about. As a parent, you want your child to sleep well and you want them to eat well. But actually, sleep a bit like food. It's what you can't make your child sleep. What you can do is kind of facilitate all the right environment, and make sure that you've got your consistent routine, that you are connecting all the rest of it. And that's, as a parent, that's all you can do, is facilitate the right thing. Sometimes your child, and you might not be able to work out why, just is having difficulty sleeping. That doesn't make you a bad parent. That's what I would say, is don't beat yourself up about it if your child has some sleep issues. If they're ongoing and you need some support, reach out for it. But remember that children do sometimes go through phases, and that perfect Instagram parenthood thing doesn't exist.
Thank you so much, Justine. Now, I know that Justine is very busy, but I do know that she's taking on new clients. So if you do want to get in contact with her, she provides, of course, yes, all the mini-me yoga workshops she does, but she also provides consultations and assists families with sleep, issues and challenges that they might be going through, or maybe you just want to know more about it. So Justine is available. So I'm going to put her details in there as well. So Justine, if it's okay, isn't it, if I pop all your contact details in there as well? Wonderful. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Justine. And I will see you soon.